All right, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to take a look at how to study for math and science tests. Studying can be a daunting task, especially in math and physics courses where it seems like there's so many different types of questions that could be thrown at you on a test. Some that you've seen before, but even some new scenarios that you need to be able to handle in a test scenario. And although there's lots of different ways to study and you ultimately need to figure out what's going to work best for you, my hope in this video is to give you some ideas that can make your studying more efficient and able to handle a wide variety of problems. So in this video, I'm going to use an analogy of a test like this. Now, this is not a real test, it's not a real concept you get asked about, but it's just an analogy for something you would see in a class. And let's say that your teacher, to your surprise, gave you all these answers. They said, here are all the answers to the test is going to be tomorrow. That would initially appear super easy. I'm like, okay, I have all the answers. I'm just going to memorize them all. We're going to crush this test. But once you sit down to study it and try to remember all these pieces of information, it actually becomes pretty difficult. It's trying to remember 20 unrelated pieces of information would be like trying to remember the first 20 digits of pi. It's definitely doable, but it's going to take a lot of time. So just trying to remember them all like that wouldn't be the best study method. So what would you do in a test like this? You'd probably start trying to organize this into groups of information. One example could be you see that it's A and B at the top here for the first 10 and the last 10 questions. I could remember that as column A and column B. I look for other patterns and I see that the first 4 answers are C. Already 4 pieces of information into one, 4C, is a lot better than CCC. So I've grouped it into something related. Maybe the next part, D and B, I maybe watch lots of football and there's a defensive back position in football. So I remember DB, 4 C's, DB. To keep going with that method, DDA is a little bit harder to come up with something for, but there's a YouTube channel called Dude Dad and he says the word awesome quite a bit. So let's say Dude Dad awesome. Now I've taken half of the test and put it really into 4 pieces of information. Column A and column B, 4 C's, defensive back, Dude Dad's awesome. We've got half the test ready to go in a pretty small amount of time. And it's unlikely that I'll forget one of these little bits. I kind of have just a couple chunks. And so that would be a great way to study for a test when they gave you the answers. Or maybe in something like biology where they give you a whole bunch of information and you need to remember things like what the mitochondria does and things like that. But in a math or physics course, they're not going to give you all the answers. There are always new scenarios on different tests. So that's not really applicable. But I'm going to show you that the method that you can use to study for a math or physics test actually would even be really useful for this one. And the reason why is that this looks like random letters and random answers, but they actually were all generated using a concept. Now this concept isn't applicable for any other test, just this one that I generated, but there's a way to get to these answers. Let's take a look at how I came up with these answers. Okay, so how I made this key was by first looking at the letters of the questions, and that's what determines the answer. So question 1 has an answer, question number 2 has an answer. And how we get the answer from the number of the question is like this. First imagine that the digits are written digitally like this, like you'd see on a clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. The reason why we're looking at it this way is there's only a couple directions that your pen would move. And that's kind of the idea here. Let's look at number 1. If I was to draw number 1 and I would begin with my pen at the top of the page, I have to move it down in one direction. Okay, we're going to look at the direction of north, east, south, and west. I only had to go south. The way I generated this set of answers was if you used one of the 4 directions, the answer is A. So here I use south. 1 out of 4 directions gives you A, and we say that that's the answer. Next question is number 2. I begin with my pen at the top of the page, and I draw the letter 2. Sorry, the number 2. As I go to make the number 2, I see that I have to go to the right, down, left, down, and to the right, or south, east, and west. I use those 3 directions. Since I use east, south, and west, I use 3 of the possible 4 directions, and that makes the answer C, which we see it is in the key as well. Get the same answer for 3, 4, and 5. Let's look at 6. It's a little bit different. If I start my pen up at the top, and I try to write the number 6, no matter how I do it, I have to move my pen in all 4 of those directions, north, east, south, and west. So I have to use all 4 of those directions. The answer ends up being D, which we can see it is in the key. Things get a little bit trickier when you get to 2 digits, but not too much more if we understand that concept. It just says if you go over 4 to 4, you're just going to restart with A, B, C, and D. So we're going to add those 2 digits together. The 1, I go down just like we did initially. It's using south, and it's got one of the directions. When I go to do a 0, no matter how I draw it, I have to go to the south, east, west, and north to make that digit. So I've got 4 from the 0, 1 from the 1, and we are over what we had from before. So we're just going to go, how many you are over is going to restart. So 5/4 would be A, 6/4 B, 7/4 C, and so on. Just restarts when you go over 4. And I would choose A, which we see the answer is as well. You could also imagine this as pulling out a whole number. So after I got to 4 to 4, that's one whole number. And the fraction left over is 1 over 4, which was A, which we had off the start. 2 over 4 B, and so on. Now that concept of trying to get the answers will not work on your test. I've never seen a test that has got the answers built like that. That's not the point of the video. The point is that if I understood that concept, the concept to how to get the answers, I could handle any question that would be thrown at me. Even if it went to 21 and 22, there would be a 100-question test, and by knowing the concept, I could answer any of it and get 100%. Your science and math tests will be structured the same way. The test answers aren't random. They're got to by a method. Maybe it's going to be trigonometry in math, maybe it's going to be forces or kinematics in physics. There's a method to get to those answers. Now, that concept was harder than memorizing. It was harder than memorizing 4 C's and then a DB. So it can kind of seem intimidating at the start to try and understand that concept. But hopefully that shows that if you put a little bit more time in at the start to figuring out how the questions work, rather than trying to memorize, if they ask me this, I do this. If they ask me this, I do this. If they ask me this, I do this. That's too much information. What's the big concept for the test? Again, trigonometry, forces, things like this. Once you get that down, you can apply it to any question. And that's when you're going to know that you're ready for a test. If you understand trigonometry, you can say any triangle get on the test, I know how to do that question. If I understand forces, no matter what diagram I get given, I can figure out acceleration. Things like that are what you want to be understanding when you go into a test. It takes a little bit more time, but once you get it, you'll be set and hopefully you do really well. I hope that helps you with your studying. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next lesson.